Thank you so much for showing up today. It's going to be a class about my experience and how it actually relates to everyone and life in general. My experience happened without me knowing anything about Kundalini. I didn't know that word. I didn't know anything about chakras. I didn't believe in chakras. I heard about it and I thought, yeah, right. That's just those people who believe in this stuff are poor lost souls. That's what I thought. And then I came to the point in my life where I was working really, really hard. I was working on my art, on my paintings, and living in LA in a very interesting place in an old Victorian house that was built in 1880s. I lived in a little turret. I actually had my bedroom in a turret. And years were going by, and I never...
I am so sorry to be late.
Come on in.
Thank you.
I'll start it all over.
Good, go that way. Right through here.
If you want a cushy seat, there's one there. Yeah. So I began about how it came that I wrote my book, which is about my experience and explanation what happened during the experience, and that the experience happened spontaneously and I didn't know anything about it beforehand. I had no clue about Kundalini rising. I didn't know the word Kundalini, or I didn't believe in chakras. And something that I heard about, known as spiritual enlightenment, was also unclear to me. I wasn't sure whether that was a real thing or not. And I guess this is how most of us live, except for the last 20 years. We've been, maybe more than 20, but just about 20, we've had this surge of spiritual consciousness. And more people know about chakras and subtle body and spiritual enlightenment, and it becomes something that we are learning about more and more. And during my experience, I was able to observe myself, my consciousness, without knowing anything about the experience beforehand. I was able to see that my consciousness was going through stages. And later, after I probably like within a year or a year and a half from the time I had my experience, I was able to compare what's already known about the experience and what's known about the subtle body with my own experience. And the new thing that I discovered is something that I've never heard anyone talk about, and that's the fact that the chakras are actually dimensions of perception. So if that's, I don't know if you know what I mean by that, but during the experience I was able to go from one world to another. So my consciousness was moving and experiencing a very specific phenomena that later I was able to compare how the chakras are described, what are their qualities, and what they relate to, as far as colors and the syllables and all kinds of attributes that the chakras have, all these different centers or different energy centers. Those are simply dimensions that are there all the time. They exist, and they exist with different principles. Each dimension works in a different way. The first three are the ones that we are always experiencing and know about it, because it's the material, the emotional, and the mental. So those three dimensions, most of us probably most of the time are aware of. We are aware that we have physical body, and we are aware that there is physical reality, that we are in it, right? But it's only one dimension. And the second one is the emotion. And that's something that also works in a different way than the material reality that we can touch and smell and hear and see. The emotional dimension, we feel it, right? Emotions can rule our life if we let them. And they can lie to us, and they can tell us the truth as well, but it's also not who we are. We often identify with emotions and think that that's the way things are because we are in that emotional state, but we don't realize that we can exist without these emotions. That it's just a dimension that we perceive. In the same way, the mind is a dimension that we perceive. We perceive it through having thoughts coming up on all kinds of subjects, and that's what we're told through our mind, and this is what it is, this is the reality. And the dominance of the first three chakras, or first three dimensions, is what ego is composed from. So ego is not a bad thing or a good thing, but because ego does not acknowledge the upper dimensions, we often get lost in it and consider our reality to be so powerful that we cannot do anything about it. But in truth, we are the creators of the reality, which is possible to find out only after the Kundalini energy travels all the way up. And this is where the Kundalini itself come into the picture, because the subtle body is something that we can observe through the sixth chakra, through the third eye. Sometimes some of us are able to see, perceive it, but most of the time we don't know about it. So the sixth chakra is telling us that those dimensions are actually there all the time, and the consciousness, that's the Kundalini, is usually asleep at the bottom of the spine, and it travels up and is able to travel up in the situation when all these chakras are opening up. And it happened to me without me knowing anything about it, but when I backtracked and learned what happened, I could easily see why there was a possibility for that experience. And this is why I wrote the book, this is why I wrote the book, this is why I'm talking about it, because each of us can experience all of these dimensions. We all have access to them if we all can experience them if we tap into them. Because these first three are easy to tap into because we're always there, right? Our Kundalini